Don't scroll. Don't skip. This prayer found you for a reason. Maybe your body is tired in a way sleep cannot fix. Maybe your heart feels heavy with a pain you cannot explain to anyone. Or maybe your soul has been silently crying out for help while the world sees only your smile. Right now, in this exact moment, pause everything, because what you are about to hear is not an accident. It is an invitation. If you believe, even just a little, that God still heals, still listens, still moves in ways beyond human understanding, then stay with me until the end. This is not just a story, it is a prayer meant to reach you exactly where you are. And before we go any further, if messages of faith, hope, and true kindness touch your heart, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel, so you never miss a prayer that could change your life. It was late at night when the pain returned, not suddenly, but steadily, like a familiar shadow slipping back into the room. The kind of pain that does not knock before entering. The lights were off, the world was quiet, yet inside, everything felt loud. Thoughts echoed. Memories resurfaced. The body felt heavy, exhausted from carrying what no one else could see. The person in this story could be anyone. It could be someone listening right now. Someone who wakes up every day and pushes through discomfort with a brave face. Someone who has tried to be strong for too long. Someone who has prayed before, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the prayer came from a place deeper than words. They lay still, staring into the darkness, feeling the ache in their joints, the tightness in their chest, the weight pressing on their mind. Doctors had given explanations, friends had offered advice, and time had been expected to heal everything. Yet here they were, still hurting, still searching, still wondering why relief felt so far away. Slowly, almost hesitantly, they whispered, "Oh God, are you still there?" It was not spoken with confidence or certainty. It was spoken with honesty. And honesty is something God never ignores. There was no dramatic sound. No sudden light filled the room. But something changed. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt attentive, as if heaven itself had leaned in to listen. Tears formed, not because of weakness, but because holding everything in had become too heavy. They placed one hand on their forehead and another on their chest, feeling the steady rhythm of a heart that had refused to give up. And they whispered again, "Heal me, Lord. Heal me from head to toe." That prayer was simple, but it was powerful. Because it came from a heart that had reached the end of its own strength. Pain teaches us how to pray in a new way. It strips away pride. It removes unnecessary words. It leaves only truth. In that quiet room, surrounded by darkness, the person felt a warmth they could not explain. Not intense. Not overwhelming. Just gentle. Comforting. Like being reminded that you are not alone, even when it feels like everyone has gone. The fear did not disappear instantly, but it loosened its grip. The tension in their body softened just a little. And in that small shift, hope was born. Healing does not always arrive like lightning. Sometimes it begins like dawn, slow, quiet, almost unnoticeable at first. A deep breath felt easier. The mind grew calmer. The heart felt less burdened. And for the first time in a long while, sleep came without struggle. Not perfect sleep, but peaceful enough to remind them that rest was still possible. God was working, even when the world was silent. When morning came, sunlight slipped through the window like a promise. The pain was still there, but it no longer felt in control. Something inside had changed. There was a sense of assurance, a quiet knowing that whispered, "You are being held." The day did not suddenly become easy. The body still carried weakness. But the soul felt stronger. Each step out of bed felt like an act of faith. Each movement became a reminder of the prayer spoken the night before. Throughout the day, the words repeated softly in their mind. While washing their hands, while sitting alone, while walking through responsibilities that did not pause for pain. "Oh God, heal me from head to toe." And with every repetition, fear weakened. Anxiety softened. The prayer became an anchor, something steady to hold onto when waves of doubt tried to return. As the hours passed, healing began to move beyond the physical. Memories long buried began to surface. Old wounds that had never fully closed. Words spoken years ago that still echoed in the heart. Moments of loss that had changed everything. Instead of pushing them away, the person offered them to God. Because true healing does not avoid pain, it brings it into the light. And God never rejects what we place in His hands. They realized how much emotional weight they had been carrying without realizing it. Forgiveness they had delayed. Grief they had silenced. Fear they had normalized. And one by one, they surrendered these burdens in prayer. Not demanding instant relief, but trusting the process. Trusting that God works in layers. Trusting that what begins in the heart will eventually reach the body. Something else changed too. The way they looked at others. Pain has a way of sharpening compassion. Suddenly, they noticed tired eyes more clearly. Quiet sadness. Unspoken struggles. And kindness flowed naturally, not forced, not performative. Just real. A gentle smile. A patient word. A silent prayer for a stranger. Healing was teaching them how to love more deeply. Strength returned in small ways. Appetite improved. Breathing felt less heavy. Sleep became less restless. These changes were subtle, but meaningful. Every small improvement felt like a whisper from God saying, I am here. Healing was no longer something they were waiting for, it was something they were living through. They began to understand that faith does not deny pain. Faith invites God into it. And in doing so, pain loses its power to define you. The question, why me? Slowly transformed into, use me. Use this experience to comfort someone else. Use this story to remind another hurting soul not to give up. Use this healing, still in progress, as proof that miracles do not always arrive suddenly, but they always arrive faithfully. The fear of the future began to fade. Tomorrow no longer felt like a threat. It felt like an opportunity. Because when God begins healing the heart, the unknown becomes less frightening. Trust replaces anxiety. Hope replaces despair. And the journey continues, not without challenges. As the days unfolded, the person began to notice something remarkable. Not a dramatic miracle, but a quiet transformation that could not be ignored. The pain still visited, but it no longer announced itself with fear. It came and went like a reminder, not a sentence. Each morning started with a prayer, not rushed or rehearsed, but sincere. Oh God, thank you for today. Heal me again. And with that prayer, the day felt lighter. Healing was becoming a daily walk, not a one-time request. They learned to listen to their body with compassion instead of frustration. Rest was no longer seen as weakness. Slowing down was no longer a failure. It was stewardship. God was teaching them to care for what He was restoring. There were moments when exhaustion tried to return, moments when doubt whispered, what if this doesn't last? But faith answered louder. Faith reminded them of the peace that arrived that night when they prayed honestly for the first time. In a long while, faith reminded them that God does not start what He does not finish. Emotionally, walls began to fall. The person realized how guarded they had become over the years. Pain had taught them to protect themselves, to hide struggles behind strength. But healing required openness. It required trust, not only in God, but in the process. They began journaling prayers, writing words they could not always speak aloud. Page after page filled with gratitude, questions, tears, and praise. And through writing, clarity came. The mind felt less crowded. The heart felt less burdened. There were setbacks too. Days when the pain flared unexpectedly. Nights when sleep was restless again. But instead of panic, there was prayer. Instead of fear, there was surrender. God, you see this. I trust you. And that trust changed everything. Because trust does not mean the absence of struggle, it means refusing to face it alone. Something beautiful began to happen in their relationships. As healing took root inside, patience grew outward. They listened more, reacted less, forgave faster. Pain had once made them withdrawn, but healing made them present. Conversations became deeper. Silence became comfortable. Love flowed without the need for explanation. This was kindness born from experience, not theory. They noticed how often people around them carried invisible pain. A friend masking exhaustion with humor. A family member quietly overwhelmed. A stranger holding back tears in public. And without preaching or fixing, they offered presence. Sometimes a kind word. Sometimes a listening ear. Sometimes just prayer. And in giving kindness, they felt strength multiply. Because God's healing is never meant to stop with us, it is meant to flow through us. Physically, progress continued. The body responded to peace. Muscles relaxed more easily. Breathing became steadier. Energy returned gradually, like a sunrise spreading light across the sky. Not rushed. Not forced. Just faithful. Each improvement felt like confirmation that God was at work in every cell, every nerve, every breath. They stopped measuring healing by what was gone and started recognizing it by what had grown. Courage, gratitude, trust, faith. These were miracles too. Perhaps the greatest ones. Because a healed body without a healed heart is incomplete. But God heals completely. Prayer became a conversation, not a request list. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they listened. Silence was no longer uncomfortable, it was sacred. In that silence, reassurance came. Not always answers, but peace. And peace was enough. There were moments of reflection, remembering how far they had come. The nights of despair, the tears in the dark. The question, are you still there? And now, the answer was undeniable. God had been there all along. In every breath, every tear, every step forward, they began sharing their journey quietly, not to impress, but to encourage. Not to claim perfection, but to offer hope. And people listened. Because authenticity speaks louder than certainty. Healing had given them a voice, not loud, but powerful. The prayer, heal me from head to toe, had transformed. It was no longer just a plea, it was a declaration. A declaration of trust, of surrender, of belief that God cares about every part of us, seen and unseen. That no pain is too small. No wound too old. No heart too broken. As weeks passed, the future no longer felt fragile. It felt guided. The person no longer feared setbacks, because they had learned where to turn. They had learned that healing is not about never hurting again, it is about knowing who holds you when you do. Kindness became their testimony. Peace became their evidence. Faith became their foundation. And the miracle continued, not as a moment, but as a life changed from the inside out. And if you are listening right now, feeling weary, uncertain, or in pain, this part of the story is for you. Healing is not reserved for the perfect or the strong. It is available to the honest, to the tired, to the hopeful, to those who whisper prayers through tears. God sees you. God hears you. God is working, right now, even if you cannot feel it yet. Place your hand where you hurt. Breathe deeply, and trust that the same God who began this healing is faithful to complete it. With time, the person no longer counted days by pain levels, but by gratitude. Mornings were greeted not with fear of how the body would feel, but with trust that whatever came, God would walk through it with them. Healing had reshaped their perspective. They understood now that God's work is not rushed, not careless, and never incomplete. Every delay carried purpose. Every quiet moment carried grace. They began each day in stillness, not asking immediately, but listening. Sometimes there were words. Sometimes there was only peace. And peace had become precious. It guarded the heart, settled the mind, and allowed the body to rest without tension. The prayer that once came from desperation now flowed from confidence. Oh God, thank you for healing me, mind, body, and soul. And even on days when pain tried to return, it no longer brought fear. It brought reminder. Reminder of how far they had come. Reminder of who had carried them. They realized that healing had touched places they never knew were wounded. Self-blame dissolved. Shame lost its grip. Old regrets no longer replayed endlessly. God had not only restored strength, He had restored identity. They were no longer defined by illness, weakness, or struggle. They were defined by grace. There came a moment when they looked in the mirror and truly saw themselves again. Not as broken, not as fragile, but as renewed. Scars remained, but scars told a story of survival, not defeat. Each scar whispered, God was here. And that realization brought tears, not of pain, but of thankfulness. The person understood now that miracles are not always loud. Sometimes the greatest miracle is waking up with hope. Sometimes it is choosing faith when nothing feels certain. Sometimes it is finding purpose in pain and kindness in suffering. God had healed them from head to toe, but He had also healed their vision, how they saw life, people, and themselves. They became more intentional with kindness. Not because they felt obligated, but because love overflowed naturally. Healing had softened them. Where there was once impatience, there was understanding. Where there was once frustration, there was compassion. Pain had once isolated them. Healing connected them. They prayed for others with sincerity they had never known before. Not distant prayers, but prayers rooted in empathy. God, heal them like you healed me. And those prayers carried weight, because they came from experience. From truth. From faith tested and proven. The future was no longer something to fear. It was something to trust. Whatever lay ahead, challenges, changes, unknowns, they knew they would not face it alone. Healing had taught them that God does not promise an easy path, but He promises His presence. And His presence was enough. They often returned to that first night, the night they whispered, "Are you still there?" And now, the answer echoed clearly through their life. Yes, God was there. In the silence, in the pain, in the waiting, in the healing. He had never left. And now, this story reaches you. If you are listening and your body hurts, your heart feels heavy, or your spirit feels tired, this prayer is for you. You are not forgotten. You are not weak. You are not alone. God sees every tear. He hears every silent cry. He knows every place you need healing. Place your hand where you hurt right now. Close your eyes if you can. Breathe slowly. And whisper it, not perfectly, not loudly, just honestly. Oh God, heal me from head to toe. Heal my body where it is weak. Heal my mind where it is tired. Heal my heart where it is broken. Restore me completely. Believe that God is already working. Even if you feel nothing. Even if answers seem delayed. Healing has begun the moment you trusted Him. And if this story, this prayer, this message touched your heart, like this video and subscribe to the channel. True Kindness Tales exists to remind you that miracles are real, prayers are powerful, and God's healing love still reaches people, just like you, exactly when they need it most. You are held. You are healing. And your story is not over.